Discover the amazing, clinically proven health benefits of original Tahitian noni. Original Tahitian noni includes powerful antioxidants, adaptogens, nutrients, and phytonutrients to naturally boost energy levels, immune system function, and overall health. Meticulously sourced from French Polynesia, this is the original superfruit. Accept no imitations. Original Tahitian noni. Visit ATR Health at alchemicaltechrevolution.com. and click on the Shop Here tab for more details.
But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
You're listening to the Alchemical Tech Revolution, and I am your host, Wayne McCroy. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are around the world. Tonight, we're going to discuss Transhumanism's Soul Trap, the Underworld, and the Occult Connection. Well, this is an interesting topic, and this may be one of my most important broadcasts to date. This one is going to connect some dots for you that have been left very loose by most people researching this type of a topic out there. Because, you see, although I've been saying for a very long time, myself and others, that there is a spiritual aspect to this whole notion of transhumanism, so far, it doesn't seem anybody's produced anything tangible to show that perhaps there is a spiritual side to this, and that there is maybe some nefarious type of a spiritual side associated with it. But tonight, we're going to connect the dots for you, and we're going to do so probably in a way that most people wouldn't even consider from the outset of everything with this. Because when we think in terms of transhumanism, we're thinking about some type of a technological or scientific advent, and when you come to realize that many of our modern sciences and everything associated with them are derived from the old alchemical ways of thinking, the old natural sciences, and all of these things that are hidden within the secrecy that's been bound up by the secret society groups of the occult fraternities, then you begin to see maybe there is a connection there, and we're going to connect the dots, like I said, in some ways that may not be evident on the face of it to most people. But we're going to explore different avenues of thought and different claims made by different people within the auspices of the occult community and within the auspices of the various occult fraternities as to what's related to this on the other side. And although within the occult community itself they haven't made the connection to transhumanism, you will see after looking at this whole dilemma from a bit of a distance, you can see the connection most certainly is there. Like I said, this one's going to be an important broadcast. So this one, I think, will go out for everyone. It's going to be a little controversial, and it's going to talk about some things that may not be real comfortable for people, but it's necessary. This is a necessity. We need to explore this connection between the transhumanist philosophy and the connection to some dark spiritual entities that seem to be present just on the outer reaches of our consciousness, that seem to have a role in the advent of this whole technological undertaking. You see, technocracy has been planned for a very long time, and technocracy is nothing more than a symptom of the overall problem that has arisen, because the overall problem that has arisen is you have this secret priestcraft class, if you want to call them that has positioned themselves into places of power in this world for as long as there's been humanity. And they seem to steer and direct agendas from behind the veil, and this constitutes what may be called in more modern terms the deep state, the shadow government, a breakaway civilization, and that is probably the best modern terminology to apply to this whole way of thinking. You see, it operates outside of the bounds of normal social boundaries. So therefore it does constitute a type of breakaway civilization, and it is inhabited very rightfully with these people with an occult bent on things, the ones that seem to place emphasis and value on exploring the means of power through the use of occult methodologies like magic and other things that we would think of in the public consciousness as nonsensical in our modern scientific paradigm, but which most certainly has value to it and does have producible techniques that can yield results. Otherwise, it would not still be with us. But they don't want us to understand that behind the scenes, these people in positions of power, this is the stuff that they study and they care about and they know how to manipulate and leverage against the rest of us. They want us to be either ignorant of that, or they want us to think that any such notion is silly and that's just tinfoil hat-wearing nutter conspiracy nonsense. But most certainly, these secret society groups have permeated all of the positions of power in this world and have sway and influence. And what exactly is it that steers and guides and directs some of these people within these secret society groups, these occult organizations, and the various levels of social order that they've placed themselves in, whether we're talking about government or whether we're talking about private industry, or even if you're talking philanthropic organizations that seem to guide agendas. This is what you would call the governance structure of this world, not necessarily mainline governments. That's just the face that carries out the orders from behind the scenes of those who decide governance. And this is wherein things get really interesting and convoluted. So who steers and guides and directs these various agendas that we see? That's the big question. Now, people will say there's no big conspiracy. There's none of this central planning that goes on behind the scenes. And they're mistaken. I mean, you could demonstrate 7 ways to Sunday that there is a type of central planning going on, even if you look at it from the mainstream perspective, from the modern scientific paradigm, and look at it from a nuts and bolts perspective on the face of it. You could demonstrate, okay, we have organizations like the World Economic Forum, we have events wherein world leaders meet to discuss various things. We have Bilderberg, we have all of these different secret meetings that happen between people in positions of power in this world, and they plan certain things and they discuss certain things, and we see certain results from there. Now that's demonstrable. That's something we can say for sure does go on, and people will still deny this. And I don't know how they can do so. But as far as the broader scale goes, and this is the scale we'll be exploring tonight, it would seem that there is some type of a beyond human intelligence that guides and directs things and steers things from outside of the control and influence of these human beings that meet in secret to decide things. Now, many of these people are involved in some of these occult fraternities, and many of them take some marching orders or some direction of some sort from them. And many of them, whether they realize it or not, are influenced by spiritual entities from these occult fraternities that help to steer agendas into place. like I said, this is the portion we'll be exploring here tonight, because this is something that is seldom discussed. And honestly, I don't think I've ever heard anybody broach this subject publicly like I am here now. Because a lot of it has to do with perhaps some of the darker underpinnings of many of these occult fraternities and secret society groups. Some people will tell you that it's all nonsense on the face of it, and some people will tell you that you better speak very quietly about things like this, because you don't want to garner the wrath of these people from these groups. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Certainly, many of these secret society groups, they don't like being besmirched all over the place. Like the Freemasons have taken an awful lot of negative connotation to the name Freemason, and of course they're always very much up there defending themselves about this. And the thing is, many of the people that get involved in these occult fraternities, they don't know what they're involved with. That would be the vast majority of the people, the bulk of the masses. They don't know what it is behind the veil that guides and directs the things that go on with these occult fraternities and the many people that they place into positions of power in this world. They don't know what's under the hood, so to say, the engine guiding and directing it all. And that's wherein we're going to get into a bit of the meat of the matter here tonight. And we're going to explore this topic from the perspective of a much respected researcher in this community of esoterica, the occult, and conspiracy. We're going to look into a 2014 publication by the late Tracy Twyman, the title of which is Clock Shavings, wherein she expresses what her experiences have been and some of the conclusions she's drawn through the occult methods of research that she had taken under in exploring these types of topics. Now, Tracy had made admissions in this book and probably elsewhere as well. You see, she was involved in founding her own secret society group based upon the principles of other secret society groups, and actually had charters from places, organizations, involved with the Ordo Templi Orientis and others to found this organization. And she got involved in some stuff that she later thought to be very questionable and had some reservations about. You see, she admits in this book where she had undertaken some of these magical rituals in order to harm other people, and had done so without batting an eyelash until later on when she really was thinking about it, and she realized, you know what, I'm doing these terrible things and trying to justify it with myself, and something's not right. Well, she also claimed to have contact with various spiritual entities, and this is at the core of the founding of this secret society group she founded, along with a couple other people, and some of the things associated therewith and some of the information that she had access to was by questioning these various spiritual entities, one of which she identified as Baphomet. Now, isn't that interesting? So she devised a whole system of communication wherein they used a very much customized Ouija board to contact spiritual entities. And some of these spiritual entities she contacted, like I said, the one that she seemed to resonate with the most was Baphomet. And this is what the claim is. You never know what you're speaking to when you're divining, if you want to call it that term. I don't think that's the proper term. When you're trying to communicate with various entities, spiritual entities from across the veil. You shouldn't be messing with this stuff. And of course, she realized after the fact it's probably not a good idea, but she had continued to do so at the time and thought that somehow it conferred some type of favor upon her or gave her some type of power over her own situation and influence in the world, and these spiritual entities she had contacted had somehow convinced her that she had some type of an importance in transforming the world, changing the world, and ushering in a new age. And we've heard all this before. But this entity that she contacted, and there were multiple entities, by the way, that she had contacted. She even claimed at one point in this book to have contacted Satan himself. And these entities had somehow convinced her or warped her mind to where she thought she was doing some important work, looking for the Holy Grail mysteries. This was always something she was very much interested in throughout the course of her life. And when she was very young, she got involved in this research and looked into these things. And this has to do with the Merovingian bloodlines, going back, looking at the works of Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and the things covered in the Da Vinci Code later on, and all of this, and the Priory of Sion, and all of these other associated things that go with that. She got heavily involved in that research, and she got heavily involved in that storyline, that narrative that was being promulgated about this Priory of Sion, which may or may not be a real organization. I think it is a real organization, but I don't think it has had the sway or influence that it claims to have had. A lot of the documentation that they provide has been proven to be forgeries and has proven to be disingenuous, but still, Tracy looked very much at this and took some of what was presented by this organization as truth. And in so doing, she decided that she would contact spiritual entities to try to get closer to the heart of the Grail mystery. And she thought she had an important role in presenting this Grail mystery to the rest of the world and changing the world and ushering in a new age. Now you see how very quickly people become, their attitudes and their intentions become quickly distorted, and they don't realize that they're being manipulated. Well, Tracy at that time did not realize she was being manipulated, but later on, in the writing of this book, she came to the realization that some of these spiritual powers were manipulating her, and she wasn't comfortable with it. And in hindsight, she looked back at some of the things she participated in and did, and was not comfortable with her role in all of that. Realized she had done these things and didn't have one modicum of regret about it until such time as she did a little bit of self-introspection later on and realized she was doing things that compromised her principles. And she didn't like it. So she started writing about this and putting her thoughts down in this book, Clock Shavings, and she began to explore some of the information that these entities she spoke to through the specially crafted Ouija board that they were using to contact them had told her, the information they gave her. Now, these beings, like I said, primarily the one she spoke to the most, claimed to be Baphomet, and also claimed to be Cain from the Bible. Baphomet claimed to be Cain. This spirit that claimed to be Baphomet also claimed to be Cain. The imprisoned spirit of Cain in the Underworld. This is how the entity described itself to Tracy. Now, this is interesting. So there are some claims here that were made, and some of the information that was derived from this source was later able to be verified by outside sources. So Tracy very much believed that this entity, this spiritual being she was contacting, was who they claimed to be, and began to connect some dots with some things. And I know some of you are probably lost here. How does this relate to transhumanism? Well, we'll get there. We'll get there. So this being, this entity, this intelligence, this spirit, whatever you want to refer to this as, was contacting Tracy Twyman and had conveyed a lot of different information to her and helped her to organize and set up her own secret society group, which had founding charters from some other secret society groups of notoriety. And she did so, and all of these secret society groups were primarily dedicated to the service of Baphomet, including Tracy's group. And this is where things get truly interesting. So the whole notion here, this organization, this secret society group, was being directed by a non-corporeal entity, a spirit, a power, an intelligence that claimed to be Baphomet. And this is the important aspect to all of this. So who was calling the shots? Who was giving the marching orders within this secret society group? It was this entity. Now, when you come to realize what Tracy began to realize, this is when things begin to make a lot more sense to you, and you understand a little bit of what's going on. And with that now being said, we're going to get directly into Tracy's own words in her book from 2014 titled Clock Shavings, where she conveyed what it is that she had discovered when she went back and looked introspectively at what she had gotten involved with and began to realize how she was being manipulated and didn't like it. So, from Tracy's own words here in her own book, I have come to the understanding that this is what many paths of occult arcana lead to. The mystery schools are created by those trapped in the underworld, including the cryptic myths and legends associated with them. From the other side, the demons entice curious travelers to make the spiritual journey down to where they are, reeling them in with a trail of esoteric breadcrumbs to follow. But those who dare to venture forth may find themselves like Hansel and Gretel at the house of an evil witch who wishes to eat them. Then they may even be transformed into evil witches and vampires themselves, needing to feed off humans to stay real. And she uses the word real in quotation marks. Now this, like I said, those are Tracy Twyman's own words. This is what she discovered after getting heavily involved in this stuff. And after having conversations with these various spirits, the main one of which claimed to be Baphomet, who claimed to at one time have been incarnated on earth as Cain in the biblical story. And this entity had told her that he was imprisoned within the earth, the underworld, Tartarus, if you want to call it that, Hades, hell, all of the other allegories that go with it, imprisoned in the earth, in the underworld, and that this is where he dwelled, and that there were other entities there as well, and they had actually built cities and such things there. And Tracy made the connection back to the story in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, when Cain was exiled after murdering Abel and was given the mark of Cain. Then he ventured off into the land of Nod, where he built a great city. Now Tracy began to put together this notion that perhaps this land of Nod, spoken of in the Bible, was a portion of the underworld, and that Cain built cities in the underworld, and various people groups that were there built great cities, and they dwelt there in the underworld, trapped in a prison of their own making. a panopticon, and that from there, these entities, these intelligences, these spirits, if you will, they sought to extricate themselves from this prison where they were exiled to and return to manifestation here in our physical reality. So this is the conclusion Tracy drew. And we'll see as we read a little further here what her ideas about this were. Now, you could read this book for yourself and see what she says. I find the connections she makes interesting because she gives some very proficient arguments as to why it is that when Cain was exiled and sent out and went off into this land of Nod, as it was called, and built a city, and he was given this mark so that other people would not kill him. Well, what other people were there? And this is wherein things get interesting, because in the Bible, we're given some very basic information as to the creation of man, and we're given various aspects of people groups that were of the lineage of the people named in the Bible. But there were other people who obviously existed at the time outside of the garden, or the area just surrounding the garden from which Adam and Eve fell and began to multiply and have children. And Cain was sent out into another land. And Tracy makes the conjecture here, the speculation, that some of these other lands, that perhaps the one like Cain was exiled to, were some type of an extra-dimensional space of sorts, that perhaps they existed on some other plane of materiality other than what we would call the dense physical chemical region that we live in now, and that Cain was sent there and found himself unable to return here, and there were other beings there, and they began to build cities, and they found themselves to be trapped here, and that this was actually the Underworld. It's an interesting way of thinking, and as I always caution you, you do need to take this stuff with a grain of salt, because there's really no way to prove nor disprove it. But it seems an interesting thought, and this is something that Tracy thought very important here. This was one of the conclusions she drew, that there was indeed an underworld wherein spiritual entities were trapped, and they sought to get out of that prison, which is also described as a prism, Prism, and this is an important point as well. And they seek to escape that and remanifest in our physical reality here. So how do they want to do that? Well, they do that by taking possession of human beings. Now, this should have sent a chill up your spine. You see, they want to manifest in the physical by taking possession of human form, possessing them, a walk-in, if you will, in the spiritual ideal. If you've explored any supernatural type topics or paranormal phenomenon, you may have heard of a walk-in, or you may have heard of demonic possession in the more common nomenclature of all of it. Well, this is what the claim is here now. This is the conclusion Tracy Twyman came to, that there does exist this underworld wherein these spirits are trapped because of their sins against the Creator, and that these beings very much want to escape this prison, but they can't escape. They can't escape. The only way they could escape is to maybe take on some type of a human form here in our physical world and manifest here physically in the material paradigm, and that will give them some relief of their tortured state of existence in this underworld. This was the conclusion drawn by Tracy, and we'll read on here. So she just told you in this first paragraph that we read from her book here, this understanding that she has come to. The mystery schools are created by those trapped in the underworld. Think about this. And search your soul, search your spirit, and you will find that this is likely true. The mystery schools are created by those trapped in the underworld, including the cryptic myths and legends associated with them. From the other side, the demons entice curious travelers to make the spiritual journey down to where they are, reeling them in with a trail of esoteric breadcrumbs to follow. I know we read that, but I had to repeat that because this is important for you to understand. So what exactly steers and guides and directs these occult fraternities and secret society groups? Well, you just heard it from the mouth of somebody who delved very heavily into this, was involved very heavily in the secret society groups, and came to this realization. What the mystery schools are. Let's read on here, though. She says, it works because at the top of the pyramid, in any secret society of occult practice, you will always find a spirit acting as the true outer head of the order, whom the human Grand Master is merely a proxy for. They are generally in contact with each other, I believe, via channeling and possession. Just as the Sholomance school of magic in Bram Stoker's Dracula was taught by the devil himself, the mysteries of each order are taught to the leaders by the true master. I'm going to pause for a moment just to add some context here for those of you who may not be picking up what I'm putting down here. And this is from Tracy Twyman herself. She discovered this, put this into type, into book format for people out there, so you can understand what is the nature of secret society groups. She's telling you here, in no uncertain terms, it is these trapped demonic and spiritual entities in the underworld who teach these various things within the secret society groups and the occult fraternities. They give you a little bit of esoteric knowledge, and they dangle a carrot before you and lead you further and further down the path into occult practice. And who are these people? Well, they're not people. They're spiritual entities that guide this. You see, she says you'll always find a spirit acting as the true outer head of the order, usually through proxy, through some Grand Master or some such thing, through possession of a Grand Master. So now you know what lies at the heart of these secret society groups. Heed the warning. That's all I'm telling you here. Heed the warning. So if you don't understand all of the stuff they teach you and the paths they lead you down that lead ultimately to your destruction, they're guiding you there. These spirits, disembodied spirits that are trapped in the underworld, the only escape they have from that prison is by possessing a human being here in the physical paradigm. And usually they do that as a proxy, through a proxy within the secret society group, some acting Grand Master or some such thing. And this is who gives orders and direction to other of the initiates of the orders, admittedly possessed by some other spirit. I hope the importance of this is sinking in for you. And we'll get to the connection to transhumanism towards the end here. You'll begin to understand all the more as we get further through here. So here we go. So Tracy had now just revealed all of this and had cited an example from Bram Stoker's Dracula. You know, fiction. They always put this stuff in fictional works to try to help you understand what the reality is. And she laid that down, telling us that the mysteries of each order are taught to the leaders of these orders by the true master, which is this spiritual entity behind it. Let's continue reading. They are then taught how to build an ark a box containing the tablets of law, the script or program on which the machinery of the ark will operate. The prophet divines the words that shall go on the tablets, allowing them to be written by an unseen hand or their own hand under alien control. He also channels the dimensions for how to construct the vessel which contains them. He allows what the alchemists call the compass of the wise, or the magnet of the philosophers, to navigate the vessel on the seas of chaos. It goes without saying that the one who receives these revelations from beyond and puts in the work to build the edifice is usually the first to steer the ship. Others follow in due apostolic succession. But the election to the highest office has nothing to do with democracy. It is something that you self-initiate. When you realize that you are the navigator, you build an ark and pilot it. At an unseen level, self-elected Solomonari of this sort are the ones running things on this earth behind the scenes. Gonna pause for a moment here. So now, Tracy's laying down some more heavy concepts to understand. I'm going to repeat that sentence and continue with the reading from there. At an unseen level, self-elected Solomonari of this sort are the ones running things on this earth behind the scenes. This is represented in popular horror films and novels as the secret underground vampire scene. They live in a system of anarchy amongst themselves, unable to dominate each other because they have each reached a certain level of transcendental power. The general population doesn't recognize their power at all because they don't know what to look for. But these illuminates know each other because they can see the shining light of the mark of Cain upon their brows. And I'm going to pause for a moment here, folks. So this would be your breakaway civilization, your secret government, your shadow government, your deep state. The ones that really run things behind the scenes at the top, these dark occultists who run things, as I like to call them, they know each other, but humanity at large doesn't recognize them. But they have the mark of Cain upon them, and this gets important when you begin to realize that Tracy Twyman, in her communications with Baphomet revealed to her that he is indeed Cain. That's at least what the claim is, and I don't even know the true nature of what this spirit being is that contacted Tracy. She probably didn't really know either, but it claimed to be Baphomet/Cain, the spiritual component of Cain, trapped in the underworld, identified as Baphomet. And you could delve deeper into that on your own if you wanted to read some of Tracy's books where she draws these distinctions and reveals this stuff. This one in particular is where she reveals a lot of that. So it's interesting. So they recognize one another, and they constitute this breakaway civilization. Let's read on. Some of these have formed a league and agreed to keep their own activities within certain boundaries in order to prevent the general population from becoming aware of the existence of the vampires. But whenever lone wolves or criminal syndicates among them decide to act in a way that brings unwanted heat down on the vampire scene, say by committing gruesome murders and leaving the evidence to be found, the Great White Brotherhood of the so-called right-hand path can sometimes step in to interfere. This is the closest they get to morality. It is really a system of rules constructed to prevent the human population from catching on to the rival species that controls them and feeds on them at a level beyond their awareness. So I'm going to pause for a moment here, folks. So now you could probably connect some dots in your own head here as to some of the things being revealed, and you could see the connection to not only perhaps the ufology movement and some of the things claimed there, but also to the nature of the spiritual side of this as well. You could see the connection to the pop culture referencing of vampires and things like this. Is it based on something real? A real spiritual influence? It just may be. At least these are the conclusions Tracy Twyman drew, and there were very few public researchers out there who delved as heavily into this stuff as she had, who were as educated on these different facets of things as she was. So I think her opinion here needs to be considered. Now remember, like I said, there's no way to really prove nor disprove this stuff, but when you delve out and explore these topics to their depths, you find that very many of the things she's saying seem to make sense and connect in certain ways. So it does need to be considered, and it does seem to reveal the true nature of what it is behind the secret society groups and behind the direction that mankind at large in this world is being steered and directed. Let's continue. In most cases, secret societies and schools of occult exist for two reasons. Number one, so that fiends of this sort can keep an eye on one another, to keep each other in check, so that those in the right-hand path can enforce a code of behavior on those of a left-hand path tendency. Those that think they're climbing the ladder to heaven, and she has that in quotation marks, by learning from the more advanced initiates, all of that in quotation marks, may just be led on a caucus race to nowhere, while the upperclassmen in the school feed off of their energy. They are nothing more than blood bags to the vampires of the group. As in Bram Stoker's story, only one student out of the total is advanced enough to ride the dragon, that's in quotation marks too, with the school's hidden headmaster, or the outer head of the order. Going to pause for a moment and remember, the outer head of the order is identified as a spiritual entity, an intelligence that guides these things, and in respect to many of these orders, that being is either Baphomet or Satan himself within these various fraternities, or at least that's the claim that is made. Let's read on. I think that for most Western occult orders, which usually take their inspiration from the Knights Templar and the Freemasons, the outer head is Baphomet. Gonna pause for a moment. So now Tracy Twyman is revealing to you what I just said as well in this statement. This seems to be the one source behind many of the secret society groups. I'm going to start that sentence over again and read from there. Why do I repeat myself so often sometimes in these things, folks? It's because I want the importance of this to sink in for you. I don't want you to overlook it or miss the whole point here. I know sometimes it sounds repetitive, and maybe you don't want to hear it a second time, but it is worth repeating. Let's read again. I think that for most Western occult orders, which usually take their inspiration from the Knights Templar and the Freemasons, the outer head is Baphomet. Yes, he's the devil, but he's a specifically mercurial expression of him, the teacher, the initiator, the lord of magic. He's a Frankenstein, a chimera, a conglomerate created through alchemy, possibly by the Templars. But that is what he is meant to be. Unity from duality, the ultimate coagulation of every imaginable setup of opposing forces dissolved to their ultimate essence and recombined into one being of infinite contradiction. At one point, we asked Baphomet to let us see him through a physical apparition. Gonna pause for a moment now. Tracy's referring to when they were speaking to him through the practice of their specially crafted Ouija board. Let's read on again. He asked us, "Are you sure?" These words were the same words he had also used when we asked him to understand the abyss. We decided against it. We knew it would be too frightening for us to see him. As Arthur Machen described it in The Great God Pan, quote, Though horror and revolting nausea rose up within me and an odor of corruption choked my breath, I remained firm. I was then privileged or accursed, I dare not say which, to see that which was on the bed lying there, black like ink, transformed before my eyes. The skin and the flesh and the muscles and the bones and the firm structure of the human body that I had thought to be unchangeable and permanent as adamant began to melt and dissolve. I know that the body may be separated into its elements by external agencies, but I should have refused to believe what I saw, for here there was some internal force of which I knew nothing that caused dissolution and change. Here, too, was all the work by which man had been made repeated before my eyes. I saw the form waver from sex to sex, dividing itself from itself, and then again reunited. Then I saw the body descend to the beasts where it ascended, and that which was on the heights go down to the depths, even to the abyss of all being. End quote. Traditionalist Julia Evola, in his classic book, The Mystery of the Grail, gives us a relevant description of how the vision of Baphomet affected the Templars. Quote, the central ritual of Templar initiation was kept very secret. From one of the proceedings of the trial, we learn that a knight who underwent it returned as pale as a corpse, and with a lost expression on his face, claiming that from then on he could never be happy again. Shortly after, the same knight fell into a state of invincible depression and died. What produces an extreme terror in some knights and causes them to flee is the vision of an idol, the Baphomet. End quote. A similar story is told by Berenger Saunier toward the end of his life. In the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, it says, quote, as Saunier lay on his deathbed, a priest was called from a neighboring parish to hear his final confession and administer the last rites. The priest duly arrived and retired into the sick room. According to eyewitness testimony, he emerged shortly thereafter, visibly shaken. In the words of one account, he never smiled again. The priest, presumably on the basis of Saunier's confession, refused to administer extreme unction. End quote. A version of Baphomet's sigil by Stanislas de Gita includes the names of the demons Samael and Lilith. The opposite side of this sigil shows the figure of a man with the names Adam and Eve written around it. Samael and Lilith are described in the Kabbalah as a hermaphroditic being formed by two serpents locked in sexual union. There is an intermediary force called Tannin Ivor, between them, necessary to make the union possible because Samael is said to have been castrated. When locked together, the Kabbalists refer to the combination of the two demons as the beast and the other god. It is said that if they were ever truly allowed to unite, it would destroy the universe. That is why the male's organs were taken to prevent cosmic doom. Gonna pause for a moment here, folks. So you may have never heard that story, but this gives a whole new context to the whole incident that occurred at the Trinity site with the explosion of the first alleged nuclear weapon. I have become destroyer of worlds. You know the whole story that goes with that. And this whole invocation of the god Shiva, the destroyer of worlds, there runs much deeper than that, doesn't it, folks? Do you see how all of this is an archetype? All of the different mythologies are representing the same archetype, just given in different story forms for the different cultures. You also see the throwback to the Osirian cycle of the Egyptian mythos within this as well. And this is the Kabbalah take on it. Let's read on. The two serpents can be seen represented in the Eliphas Levi depiction of Baphomet, where he is shown with the twin-snaked caduceus pole rising from his crotch region. These snakes, in combination, are said to be the serpent that tempted Adam and Eve in Eden. Samael may have been the true father of Cain through Eve, and Lilith may have mothered thousands of demon children by having sex with Adam, or so the Kabbalists say. I believe that what is being alluded to is sex magic through demon possession. The serpent is castrated because he is no longer alive and able to generate sexually. He and his wife Lilith can only unite by possessing other humans. Their bodies are the tannin ivor, symbolized in mythology and stories like that of Isis, who had to fashion a golden dildo to have sex with her husband, Osiris. I'm going to pause for a moment here, so the importance of this is not lost to you. What's being revealed here is of utmost importance. It's represented by this symbol of Baphomet that seems to have taken on all kinds of newfound popularity in our culture in various ways. Think of the goat. Well, a lot of people are using the term goat anymore to place emphasis on something good, the greatest of all time, aren't they? The goat. He's the goat, they'll say. Well, do you see how the subtle implication is a reference to this Baphomet figure and what it represents? What's being revealed here is that these demonic beings who are imprisoned in the underworld, they have no means of reproducing themselves or physically manifesting themselves except through the intermediary. This intermediary is represented in the Kabbalistic teachings as tannin ivor. So let's draw some more dots, connect some more dots. Display the intention here of what the symbols mean. So we have these twin serpents, Samael and Lilith, one representing the masculine, one representing the feminine. Now the masculine side of it has been emasculated, because if it were to find its full manifestation, it would destroy all of our reality. This is the claim made in Kabbalah. This is the archetype that underlies the Osiris myth, that underlies many of these other myths. You see, this male generative force represents a destructive force in some systems here, in some implications given. And that given its full manifestation, it would destroy everything, the universe. Therefore, it needed to be castrated. Now, you could probably connect the dots 7 ways to Sunday to the various agendas that are being played on in this world today regarding sexuality and gender identity, and maybe understand a little bit of what's represented symbolically in that, in regards to this. But I don't want to get hung up on those side points, because those are side points, and they're subtle ways in which it influences the human unconscious mind that we don't realize on a conscious level, but it is definitely ever present there. So the important portion of this is we have these spiritual counter beings to the original concept of Adam and Eve. We have Samael and Lilith, given as a spiritual reflection of the physical beings Adam and Eve. And when original sin was introduced in the physical paradigm here, at least if you go back and you look at it from the biblical cosmology, It is said that these spiritual beings, Lilith and Samael, had something to do with that. They're the ones who introduced evil, or at least the distinction between good and evil, into this world. It's a concept called the left emanation. We've explored that on programs in the past here. And they did this through possession of the bodies of Adam and Eve and the production of offspring. And it is said Samael fathered Cain in the Kabbalistic tradition, and many of the people at the highest, most levels of the occult fraternities and secret society groups of this world very much believe that and act upon that, and they are obsessed with royal family bloodlines, and that's why they trace their lineage in this way. They think themselves semi-divine and therefore have a semi-divine right to rule. Well, what's being revealed here is because in the spiritual side of this, these beings, Samael and Lilith, and the very things they represent, their ambitions that they represent, can be inherently dangerous to the natural order, and therefore the male portion was castrated. And in order for them to manifest now, these spiritual entities that are trapped in the underworld, in order for them to manifest, they have to have this intermediary, this concept put forward in the Kabbalah known as Tannin Iver. What is Tannin Iver? Well, let's be very plain about it. Tracy Twyman tells us in no uncertain terms here what this is. It's sex magic through demon possession within a human being. The human body is Tannin Iver, the connecting link. Their bodies are the Tannin Iver, symbolized in mythology in the stories like that of Isis, who had to fashion a golden dildo to have sex with her dead husband Osiris. Pay attention here, folks. Continuing from the reading here. I think that these serpents have been breeding with humans, particularly in the royal caste, for thousands of years. Their goal is to inhabit all of the seats of power in what is, by God's decree, the kingdom of the children of Adam. They want people that are their own descendants and their own possessed automatons to sit on the thrones of the world and reshape the order of the globe to fit a pattern that they have in mind. Somehow, by uniting the world in this way and putting their own scion on the seat of power, they believe that they will be released from their infernal prison. And this is just exactly what Revelation 20, verse 7 predicts. Quote, "And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison." End quote. So I'm going to pause for a moment there. Now think about this. Think about what's being revealed here. You see, these spiritual entities that are trapped in the underworld, in their prison, because of their gross violations of natural law here and their disobedience to the Creator, they seek to get out of that prison. And how can they do that? By the proxy called Tannin Iver, which is the possession of the human body by these spirits and the sexual union thereof. Now, this harkens back to the book of Genesis, chapter 6, as well. When you look at the incursion of the Watchers and the advent of the Nephilim and these various other things that happened at that time, according to what the account gives us, it's the same thing being described here, but think about it in more modern terms. Now, let's continue on here from what Tracy had discovered and put forward here. Back to the reading. The impression we have gotten from talking to Cain and Baphomet, which continues unto the present day, is that the reality in which we live is like a little bubble of safety within the vast expanse of nothingness that surrounds it. That is where they are now, in a state of negative existence. This is chaos, the abyss, the land of Nod, and hell. The metaphors used to describe it as a sea. But it also is said to be full of fire that burns like nothing else, yet is simultaneously bitingly cold. All of these are attempts to explain what it feels like to not really exist, but to still be out there somewhere with some form of consciousness that is ineffable. During a recent conversation with Cain, going to pause for a moment. Now, Tracy still, allegedly after this point, was still contacting these entities and speaking to them. And this is what she's revealing, that they had revealed to her. And a lot of this is important. As we'll see here, to events in the modern era, to things happening today, not only relating to these occult fraternities that lie behind the seats of power in this world, but the things that they are beginning to bring into real manifestation here in the day-to-day world of the average person. And we'll begin to connect the dots here before too much longer. So she says here, during a recent conversation with Cain, and remember, this would be another aspect of the personality of Baphomet, according to what she said here. He told us that he and the other prisoners in hell were being tortured. We asked if their tormentors were God's angels. He said no. When I inquired as to the torture, where the torture comes from, it comes from the other prisoners, and he gave an emphatic yes. When we asked, what kind of torture are you experiencing, he said, Gitmo. When pressed, he said that just like Guantanamo Bay prisoners have been waterboarded, he is tormented with the feeling like he is dying over and over again. He also admitted that he, too, was torturing others. Cain told us that the land of Nod was represented by the Aegeo board. Going to pause for a moment. Now, this is another topic that we'll have to probably discuss at some other day. Aegeo is an ancient version of the game of chess, and it is said to be a very important symbolic representation of other planes or realms of existence here. So this is an important thing to discuss and to explore. And Tracy gave a little more context of that earlier in this book. But we're going to just read through this part, and that's something we'll discuss another day. Because this has to do with perhaps the design and layout of this underworld. So she says here, now remember, Cain had said that the real power was in the second square. The second square is the inner 36 squares on the game board, or the chess board. Cain said that this is Enoch, the city that he built in Nod. We asked if he named the city after his son, and he said no. It was the other way around. He told us that the city is a cube, but interestingly, Cain said that he himself is not imprisoned inside of that cube. Rather, he said that he and the other prisoners are on the surface of the cube, in a ring of 28 squares on the periphery of the Aegeo board, or chess board. One can imagine that it is like the panopticon prison design invented by Jeremy Bentham, now used in penitentiaries all over the world. The way it works, the watchtower, where the prison guards stand in position in the center, with the prisoners stationed around in a circle. The purpose is so the guards can see everything that is going on in the cells, and the prisoners never know if they are specifically being watched at any given moment. Gonna pause for a moment. So now, I know this is a lot to take in, but think about the connotations here. Think about what's being laid down, and I think if you've been listening for any length of time, your mind is now connecting the dots by itself to the transhumanist notion of things that we will get to here shortly. Let's continue reading here, though. The Panopticon is named after Panoptes, the figure from Greek myth, with 1,000 eyes. The National Security Administration has tried to mimic this with their omniscient global communication surveillance program, which they codenamed appropriately PRISM. You'll recall that Cain used the word to describe the prison in which he was trapped. But he is not at the center of that prism. That's where the cube is, containing the all-seeing eye. It is interesting to note that the logo for the NSA's PRISM program shows a crystal triangle either coming into or going out of the black void inside of a shape that has been made from 2 hexagons. One of those hexagons is smaller than the other and is overlapping the larger one, partially obscuring 2 of its sides. It is as if the smaller hexagon is in the process of either entering or exiting the larger one. I am not saying that the people who designed this logo know about the prison in the underworld or the structure of the IGO or chessboard with the second square inside. However, it seems to me that these secrets have a way of emerging from the works of human creativity, often without the artisan's conscious knowledge, for reasons that I will attempt to describe further on here. So we have this notion of this underworld being a prison, that we have these entities that are trapped in this prison that can somehow communicate into our physical world at certain points through certain proxies, and they seek to manifest here. They seek to possess a human body, to free themselves or extricate themselves from this prison. And here's where it gets really nefarious. You see, the ultimate goal for these beings is not just a temporary break from their tortures in this prison. It is to completely extricate themselves from it and put a proxy in their place. So essentially what they want to do is swap places with the human being whom they will possess. A soul trap. Now, when you look at this through the context of the occult, there are many occultists who could understand some of the principles here and maybe reaffirm some of the details that are being laid out. But what most have failed to recognize is the connection to technology and the connection to many things happening in the world today, and how this gives an ultimate type of control mechanism to this thing. You see, we don't understand what's being built and developed on the other side. Perhaps there are corresponding things being set in place on the other side of the veil here that align or mirror what's going on in the physical here, as above, so below, as within, so without. And maybe it's all about trading places. It's a lot to think about, isn't it? But let's give a little more context to it. Let's get back to the reading here. Kabbalists also talk about Metatron's cube. This is a hexagram within a hexagram made from 13 circles, which can also be viewed as a flat representation of a three-dimensional cube within a cube. It is thought by some to be an ethereal vehicle, a Merkava, or chariot, used by the angel Metatron when traveling from one realm of existence to the next. Who is Metatron? Why, he's nothing less than that other Enoch, the one described from Seth, who is credited with the writing of the Book of Enoch. I'm going to pause for a moment here, folks. So if you're not familiar, in the biblical lineage, both Cain and Seth both had descendants named Enoch. Now, the Enoch descended from Seth is the one that is credited with writing the book of Enoch and with later being transmuted into the angel Metatron. Metatron, and this is something that is of extreme importance in Kabbalism. Metatron and Metatron's cube. So just to bring you up to speed on that. So let's get back to the reading. So now it continues and says, actually, there were several books written by Enoch, but the main one was about his descent to the underworld, guided by the angel Uriel, where he got to view where the fallen angels were imprisoned. He was shown what crimes led to their incarceration and torture, the breeding of giants with human females. They actually begged for him to pray to God on their behalf to forgive them and let them out of hell. Then Enoch was taken up to heaven and shown all the secrets of that kingdom. He was also shown the future of the earth and what would happen in the days of his great-grandson Noah. Traditionally, Enoch is said to have stayed in heaven rather than having to return to earth to die a mortal death. And Genesis 5:22 and 23 tells us, quote, and Enoch walked with God after he begat Methuselah 300 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. End quote. Interestingly, the number of years Enoch lived, 365, is very close to the number of books he is said to have written, which is 366. He is said to be the only human being to whom God has given this blessing. Then, the Kabbalists say he was translated into an angel and renamed Metatron. As Gershom Shalom wrote in Major Trends in Jewish Mysticism, quote, this Enoch, whose flesh was turned to flame, his veins to fire, his eyelashes to flashes of lightning, his eyeballs to flaming torches, and whom God placed on a throne next to the throne of glory, received after this heavenly transformation the name Metatron. End quote. To comparative mythologists, Enoch is a scribe and messenger angel, likened to Hermes, Mercury, Thoth, and the Green Man. Some have even connected his name to that of Mithras. Another name applied to him in the Zohar means the youth, perhaps because he stopped aging after he went to paradise. And I'm going to pause just to add in, and this may be an allusion to Mercury as well, because Mercury is said to be a youth as well, eternally. But let's get back to it. However, it also seems to imply he's a servant boy to God. Another title he's given is the Little Jehovah. Translations of the name Metatron include Keeper of the Watch, Guardian or Protector, one who serves behind the throne, and co-occupant of the throne. To him, perhaps God truly is his co-pilot. As stated, Enoch is said to have written many books. One of them, or perhaps the whole body of works taken together, are seen by esotericists as synonymous with the famed Emerald Tablet of Hermes, which reveals the alchemical secrets of creation. In the third book of Enoch, also called the Revelation of Metatron, the 48th chapter tells us that God gave his secret name to Enoch, who then passed it on to Moses. And it says, quote, Metatron brought it out from my storehouses and committed it to Moses, and Moses to Joshua, Joshua to the elders to the prophets. End quote. Other angels, said to have been offended by this, objected, saying, why are you revealing it to flesh and blood? So, once more, we have an expression of jealousy by the angels towards mankind because of God's favoritism for some of our kind. Yet again, as in the book of Adam and Eve and the Quran, with the stories of angels being asked to bow down to Adam, the objection from the dissenting angels is that we bleed and we are made from matter or clay, making us inferior in their eyes to their own loftier, subtle essence. But it appears that mankind has a peculiar role to play in the universe. Enoch was chosen by God, like the Adam Kadmon of the Kabbalistic creation tradition, to be a microcosmos, the so-called microprospis, an image of the invisible God. You will recall that his ancestor Seth was begot by Adam in his own image, like God created Adam. So I'm going to pause for a moment here, folks. So now there's a lot of things being revealed here. A lot of different information being revealed here about some of the things taught in the Kabbalic traditions, some of the things associated across the board with a lot of this stuff. And we could begin to make some connections. Let's continue on and see what else we can reveal here. In a way, he was a mediator between God and man, the way Hermes was said to be for the Greeks. He was a guide, as Hermes was the psychopompos, a guide to the underworld. One of the things said about Metatron in the third book of Enoch is that he was the pillar of fire and the cloud that guided the Israelites to the portal in the Red Sea, the official abode of Lilith, by the way, it says here, from which they entered the wilderness. And it says in parentheses, Nod, the abyss. So you could see Tracy Twyman now beginning to make some references in regards to the story as the connection here to the underworld. The wilderness where they wandered for 40 years. They passed through safely, but the pursuing enemies got cut into pieces, dissolved into chaos because the portal closes on them unexpectedly. The land where they eventually arrived in what seemed to them to be 40 years later was the site of what the Jews came to believe was the foundation stone of the world. I am talking about the sacred stone beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem called the Eben Shetiyah. It is on display in Jerusalem today. They say that God actually started building the universe from this point, working outward from here. It is said to have a well leading to hell directly beneath it. In religious iconography, there is something called Jerusalem's cross, or the Crusader's cross. It is an equilateral cross with 4 smaller crosses in each of its 4 corners. This is supposed to represent the 5 wounds of Christ. But to me, this is to Tracy Twyman, it resembles more a representation of the city of Jerusalem with 12 gates. It also resembles, as she recently realized, the image of the IGO board or the chessboard with the 4 crosses marking out the corners of what's called the second square, or that would be the inner 36 squares of the chessboard. Interestingly, this symbol was also used by Aleister Crowley when signing with the name Baphomet, which he utilized in his capacity as the Grand Master of the Ordo Templi Orientis. It's also the Triple Cross, or Salem Cross, worn by the Sovereign Grand Commander of the Supreme Council of the 33rd degree of Freemasonry. The key to the mystery here is the New Jerusalem, described in the Revelation of St. John as descending from heaven at the end of the apocalypse. In dimensions, it is a perfect cube and shines like a precious stone, just like the cubic stone of the philosophers. This is all part of an alchemical process in which God creates heaven and earth anew and expels all impurities from creation back into chaos. It is the death of the old universe and the birth of a new one, with the heavenly city as the foundation stone and the throne of God. As in alchemy, it is even likened to a wedding. In Revelation 21, 1-6, we read, quote, "And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them, and be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for all the former things are passed away. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. And he said unto me, It is done. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end." End quote. Then we get more details also on the city in Revelation 21:9. Again, its descent is described as a marriage. And it says, quote, "And there came unto me one of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials full of the 7 last plagues, and talked with me, saying, Come hither, I will show thee the bride, the Lamb's wife." End quote. Then Revelation 21:10 through 14 gives us another description of the cubic city as a stone. We are told that it has 12 gates corresponding to the tribes of Israel and the apostles of Christ. And it says here, quote, "And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God, having the glory of God, and her light was like unto a stone most precious, even like a jasper stone, clear as crystal, and had a wall great and high, and had 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and names written thereon, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and in them the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb." And I'm going to pause for a moment. Then Tracy goes on to give some more descriptions from the book of Revelation, describing this cubic city of the New Jerusalem, the foundation stone for the new world, the new heaven and new earth that we are promised in the Bible. So to sum it up, let's see what this says. What is happening here is a redefinition of reality. Everything that is to be saved is placed inside of this cube with God. Everything on the outside is to be cast off into chaos. Those inside are the ones with their names written in the book of life. If your name is not there, it is like you never existed. And then she gives some more backing from the book of Revelation here as to this claim. So here's what Tracy began to realize. Maybe some of what's represented in the Bible is true. And these spiritual entities that are operating from the underworld, where they are imprisoned and are trying to manifest here, they want to switch places with us. They want to be safe within the auspices of this new ark, the archetype of the ark. When the dissolution of the old comes into being and the new creation comes about, the new age, if you will. So this cube then becomes the foundation stone, the Ibn Shadiyah of the new world. The way I see it, this is Tracy speaking, the way she sees it, something similar happened in the days of Noah in Genesis. God told Noah to build an ark according to certain dimensions and collect samples of creation that he wanted to save, to use them to recreate creation at the end of the process. Then he told Noah to shut himself up with these things inside the vessel and not come out for a certain period of time. Around him, everything was dissolved into chaos, the waters of the abyss. When they came out of the ark after 40 days, the land that his ark rested upon became ground zero for a new civilization. It was the highest peak in the world, God's mountain, referred to in the book of the Cave of Treasures as Mount Cardo. It was the axis between heaven, earth, and the underworld. There is a Greek word for this, and it is called apobaterion, place of the landing. This term is applied to Mount Judi in Turkey, though thought by many to be the location of the ark's remnants. It is also said by some biblical scholars to be the same as Cain's city of Enoch that he allegedly built in the land of Nod. We know that there were supposedly 2 Enochs, a good Enoch, the descendant of Seth, the great-grandson of Noah, and a bad Enoch, the firstborn son of Cain. The good Enoch was first sent to hell as a watcher, an all-seeing eye, watching the angels in their prison. Then he was translated to heaven, where he was turned into an angel, Metatron, who roams the universe in a cubic vehicle. Thus, Metatron's cube, ladies and gentlemen. The bad Enoch was the inspiration for the building of Cain's city, or as Cain told us, now this is Tracy Twyman claiming she had used a specially designed Ouija board and contacted Cain himself, who also claims to be another personality aspect of Baphomet. This is what he told her. Cain told them the child was named after the city, so he also implied strangely that perhaps the city and the child were the same thing. Isn't that interesting? In artificial creation, the child of Cain. Maybe an artificial intelligence? What do you think? The heavenly city of the New Jerusalem has no night and no need of sun or moon. It also has no temples, for God is the temple himself. And it gives another description from the book of Revelation. For time's sake, we're going to skip past these. In contrast, the realm that Cain is trapped in is one of perpetual night. This is why they need the artificial sun, or the black sun, to light the way for them and to provide energy. It also provides magnetism, which they use as a compass to navigate the abyss, and a gauge with which to measure it. To them, the black sun has been a cornerstone, a little nugget of reality upon which they could attempt to build something. Cain's city of Enoch, built in the land of Nod, is probably, in fact, Cain's attempt to copy the design of the New Jerusalem with an infernal reflection down below. There are indeed cities in the underworld, according to the Greeks and even to Dante Alighieri. In the Divine Comedy, we learn that the centermost and most glorious of these cities is called Dis, D-I-S, which is another name for Hades, the ruler of the underworld in Greek myths. Dante said that this encompassed the 6th through the 9th circles of hell. Its walls are guarded by fallen angels. Believing that Muslims were heretics, the author also depicted the city with a mosque full of Mohammedans still worshipping what he saw as their false god. Gonna pause for a moment there, folks. So now are you beginning to understand the importance of the black cube? The dark cube. You see, it's an artificial knockoff of God's divine city, in which we will transition into our heavenly estate at the end of the age, or the end of time. It's an arc of sorts to transition us through that time of chaos, to reestablish new roots and foundations in a new, better age. And these demonic essences trapped in the underworld are attempting to duplicate that, to make it an infernal version of that. A reflection in the underworld. The black cube. We've also made allusion to the fact that perhaps this Enoch, that is said to be the firstborn child of Cain, whom he said the child's named after the city, and perhaps they are one and the same. Was this an artificial intelligence? Is it an artificial intelligence? The black cube, artificial intelligence. D-Wave's quantum computer. We've seen all of this stuff reflected here in the transhumanist movement. What do you make of all of this? We're going to read a little bit more, and we're going to wrap it up here. Interestingly, the second square on the Igeo board or chessboard encompasses the 3 inner rings of black and white squares on the chessboard, where the real power and his city of Enoch resides. Since the underworld is a reverse and negation of the heavenly realm, it only makes sense to think of this infernal cubic city as black. Masonic writer Albert Pike said in his Morals and Dogma that, quote, "The ancients adored the sun under the form of a black stone called Elagabalus or Heliogabalus. The faithful are promised in the Apocalypse a white stone," end quote. Another Masonic writer, Manly P. Hall, brings up this subject as well as the obvious connections which spring to mind regarding the black stone venerated by Muslims inside the black cubic Kaaba temple in Mecca. This stone is believed by the faithful to have fallen from heaven. There is a tradition going back to at least to the Imam Ali, stating that the black stone brought the germ of life with it. The veneration of this stone at the site of the Kaaba shrine is older than Islam. So too is the shape of the temple and many of the rituals that are still performed there, now in the name of Allah instead of pagan gods. The polytheist Kaaba was formerly the home of 360 stone idols that were consulted by the pre-Islamic pagans there for divination and spell-casting purposes. The location is thought by Muslims today to be the center point of the world, with a gate to heaven open above it. On this subject, Manly P. Hall wrote in The Secret Teachings of All Ages that, quote, divination by stones was often resorted to by the Greeks, and Helena is said to have foretold the lithomancy, the destruction of Troy. The black stone also appears several times in religious symbolism. It was called Heliogabalus, a word presumably derived from Elagabal, the Syro-Phoenician sun god. This stone was sacred to the sun and declared to possess great and diversified properties. The black stone in the Kaaba at Mecca is still revered throughout the Mohammedan world. It is said to have been white originally, and of such brilliancy that it could be seen many days' journey from Mecca, but as ages passed it became blackened by the tears of the pilgrims and the sins of the world. End quote. So lithomancy, it says here, is divining messages by stones, in particular by the way in which light that may seem to shine out of them or be reflected by them. This was the type of divination that took place in the temple in Jerusalem right before the Ark, using a set of crystal objects called the Urim and Thummim. Is this related to the language of light that both Baphomet and now Cain also have told us is spoken by the lustrous ones, the angels? I'm going to pause for a moment. So this is also something that came up in her alleged conversations with these spirit entities, that they speak a different language, the language of light. They understand this, and perhaps it's a veiled allusion to the language of symbology, or maybe there is a language that they know. And maybe Dr. John Dee, when he put down the Enochian language, as he called it, was touching upon this a little bit. I don't have the answers, folks, but I'm giving you an awful lot of food for thought here tonight. This is important. This is where the rubber meets the road with many of these things. So we have in this book Tracy Twyman's thoughts and conclusions she came to about the nature of reality and the nature of the secret society groups, the nature of what's at the heart of all of it. And we can see through the law of analogy and through the use of our discernment the connection here to the transhumanist way of thinking. So what's been revealed here tonight is a very important set of information for people out there to take in. First and foremost, the important thing, the secret society groups, where do they get their teachings from? From demonic entities imprisoned in the underworld. What is their modus operandi, these entities? They want to manifest in human form. They want to take possession of human bodies and manifest here and create an ark of safety for themselves in the coming apocalypse to ride it out. They want to swap places with the human souls here. So therefore, their attempt to do this could ostensibly lead human souls into destruction while their demonic souls possess the human body and continue onwards. Now, a lot of this may sound like absolute bunk and nonsense to a lot of you folks out there. And here's the point. What you think about it is irrelevant. Remember, there are people in positions of power in this world that very much believe in these things, and the things they do to act upon their beliefs in these things will affect all of us. So you better understand it. Whether you agree with it or not, or think it's accurate or not, what's going on, we've been informed. We have many, many different facets of this we could look at that will espouse to us the truth that it is spiritual warfare of the highest order going on. Understand and know what's associated with this. This has gone beyond just a bunch of weirdos in occult fraternities meeting and doing magical rituals and stuff like that, and all of these things associated with the occult loosely in the past. It goes way beyond that now. Way beyond that. This stuff has always happened to a certain degree, and it's been kind of a subculture of its own that has existed as an undercurrent beneath the greater society as a whole. It's been recognized that it's there, but very few people interact with it or want to have anything to do with it or acknowledge that it even exists, but it is there. Well, this is becoming mainstreamed in the form of technology and technocracy. You see, it's one and the same thing. That's why this podcast is called the Alchemical Tech Revolution. They're taking these old magical and natural science concepts and reapplying them in a technological bent in this modern era, and using technology to bring into manifestation this new world that they want. And who are they? At the heart of all of it, it is these dark entities, these demonic entities trapped in the underworld, and they want out. And they can only do that through the intermediary that is the human being, the Tannin Ivor of Kabbalistic thought. Now, they were limited in their capacity to do this for the longest time here. They could only do it through willing proxies that they teach in these occult fraternities, who allow themselves to be a vehicle for the manifestation of the spirits that are communicating to them from the other side here, from the prism, the underworld. But now, they want to begin to bring about an incursion on this reality to the unaware, the unknowing, the unwilling participants. And they will do this through the guise of technology, deceit, trickery, transhumanism. You can be as God. All you got to do is take this brain chip and upload your consciousness to the machine. What are you doing when you're uploading your consciousness to the machine? Well, is this actually trading places with the souls trapped in the underworld? Is it a soul trap? Wherein you will find your eternal torture, as these beings claim to have been undergoing and are seeking to get out, off into darkness. We need to be wary of this, ladies and gentlemen, and like I told you, whether you believe any of it or not is irrelevant. There are people in positions of power in this world that very much believe in these things, and the things they do to act upon them will affect all of us. So you need to be aware of that. Perhaps some of these people think that somehow they'll be spared when it all comes down, if they participate with what these dark beings want. Or maybe they've fooled themselves. They are deceived. They are manipulated. And they don't understand that this is the ultimate end game. It's worth consideration I do reserve the right to be totally wrong about all of this, but it seems to me that somebody who is as well versed as Tracy Twyman in all of this has come to these same conclusions as myself. I think it adds a little bit of feasance to the idea. Now, she didn't connect the dots to the transhumanist notion of this. Certainly not, but it is there. If you've been looking at any of these topics for any length of time, you know that this is at the core of all of it. So like I said, this may be one of the most important broadcasts I've ever done to date. And I will put it out there so everyone can hear this. Make of it what you will. Consider this. Anyway, that's all the time we have for tonight. I want to thank you all for tuning in, and I want to remind you I appreciate each and every one of you. We'll catch you next time. Have a good one now. Discover the amazing, clinically proven health benefits of original Tahitian noni. Original Tahitian noni includes powerful antioxidants, adaptogens, nutrients, and phytonutrients to naturally boost energy levels, immune system function, and overall health. Meticulously sourced from French Polynesia, this is the original superfruit, except no imitations. Original Tahitian noni. Visit ATR Health at alchemicaltechrevolution.com. and click on the Shop Here tab for more details.
But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.